High in the mist-covered cliffs of northern Ethiopia, carved into sheer rock faces, lie hundreds of mysterious openings, tomb-like chambers dug into vertical stone, some suspended hundreds of feet above the valley floor. They seem to defy gravity, logic, and even time itself. Who built them? When? And more hauntingly, why? No roads lead here. No inscriptions mark their entrances. No tools. No skeletons. No belongings have ever been definitively linked to the people who carved them. The tombs remain empty, but not silent. They whisper of a vanished culture, lost to the ages and erased from memory. For centuries, the local people have told stories. Some say these were the homes of sky spirits. Others believe monks carved them as sanctuaries to escape persecution. But none of these tales explain the tombs found in the most inaccessible places, high above even the reach of ropes or ladders. Carved with precision, perfectly aligned, and sometimes in patterns. This isn't random. This was planned. And then there's the sheer number of them. Scattered across Ethiopia's northern Tigray and Amhara regions, there are more than 500 known sky tombs, and likely hundreds more hidden by rockfall, erosion, or overgrowth. Many have never been entered, let alone studied. Archaeologists call them rock-cut funerary chambers. But that sterile phrase fails to capture what they truly are: pieces of a puzzle scattered across cliffs and time, too complex and too intentional to be forgotten coincidences. This is a story of vertical necropolises, acoustic resonance chambers, and architectural feats modern engineers can barely explain. It's a story that connects ancient Ethiopia to Yemen, Arabia, and perhaps even to pre-Aksumite cultures that history forgot. But more than that, it's a story of memory and loss, a civilization that carved its legacy into the hardest material it could find, stone, and still vanished without a trace. No texts, no names, just echoes. In this documentary, we will descend into these forgotten tombs. We'll examine the geology, the culture, and the radical theories, from ritual death rites to extraterrestrial speculation. We'll explore hidden connections across the ancient world, question the mainstream archaeological silence, and confront the possibility that we've misunderstood these structures entirely. Are we looking at burial tombs or something else? Temples of transformation, celestial observatories, or the final remains of a vanished elite? Each chamber opens not just into rock, but into deep time, forgotten rituals, and maybe even a forbidden understanding of the soul, the self, and the cosmos. This is not just about Ethiopia. This is about the limits of what we know and the power of what we've lost. Welcome to a mystery carved in cliffs. Welcome to the sky tombs of Ethiopia. High in the sheer limestone cliffs of northern Ethiopia, in a place where the sky meets stone, lie dozens of tombs carved directly into rock faces. These are no ordinary burial chambers. They're almost unreachable, hundreds of feet above the ground, chiseled into vertical walls by hands long vanished. Locals call them sky tombs, for they seem suspended between earth and heaven. For centuries they were barely noticed, hidden in remote highlands far from major cities and disconnected from most historical records. But when archaeologists began documenting the region in the late 20th century, the tombs left more questions than answers. Who were the people buried so far above the ground? What kind of civilization had the tools and the reason to build their cemeteries in the clouds? As we open this journey into Ethiopia's forgotten cliff cities, we enter a mystery still unsolved. These tombs are carved with uncanny precision. Some feature stone lintels, burial niches, and even frescoed walls. Yet no inscriptions, no names, no known religion. They predate the region's Christian monasteries, yet seem to follow no pagan tradition we've identified. Some are so remote they can only be accessed by rappelling or drone. How then were bodies transported there centuries ago? And why? What force or belief compelled a society to bury its dead in the sky? In a country known for its layered past, from the kingdom of Aksum to Lalibela's rock-hewn churches, these tombs seem to belong to no known chapter. Are they remnants of a proto-Aksumite society, a mountain-bound culture erased by war, climate, or conquest? Or is this the work of an undocumented civilization, one that left no written records, only this skyward necropolis as its legacy. The official story of these tombs begins not in antiquity, but in the 1970s, when a handful of Italian and Ethiopian researchers, guided by local shepherds, made a startling discovery. In the Tigray highlands, above a sheer canyon wall, villagers pointed to what looked like holes in the cliffside. With the help of makeshift gear and crude climbing ropes, the team ascended the vertical rock and entered a chamber carved into the mountain itself. Inside were niches that once held human remains, signs of fire-blackened ceilings, and faint pigment traces suggesting the walls had once been painted. It was a tomb, but not like anything seen before in Ethiopia. Excitement among the team was palpable, but the archaeological world reacted differently. Early reports were met with skepticism. At the time, Ethiopia's focus was on its grand Aksumite monuments, such as towering obelisks and early Christian churches. Cliffside tombs that couldn't be carbon dated directly and lacked inscriptions were considered untrustworthy. They're probably medieval monk shelters, some claimed, or bandit hideouts. The idea that an unknown civilization had carved tombs hundreds of feet in the air was too strange, too speculative. For decades, these tombs remained on the fringes of Ethiopian archaeology. But then came more discoveries. By the 1990s and early 2000s, climbers and researchers documented additional sky tombs scattered across the Tigray and Amhara regions. Some were elaborate, with carved entrances, burial ledges, and even water drainage systems. In a few, pottery shards were found, simple undecorated vessels that carbon dated to before the rise of Aksum. One chamber contained dozens of skulls stacked haphazardly, showing signs of trauma or possibly ritualistic arrangement. This was not monastic, this was something older and darker. Still, without inscriptions, dates remained guesswork. And without full excavation, almost impossible due to the tomb's location, conclusions remained elusive. Local oral traditions offered tantalizing clues. Elders spoke of the sky people or the stone sleepers, ancestors who rose to the cliffs to stay above the flood. Others whispered of curses and spirits and warned researchers not to enter. The further back one dug, literally and culturally, the less clear the truth became. Why would a culture choose to bury its dead where only birds could reach them? Was this a defense against grave robbers, a spiritual elevation, or an offering to sky gods now lost to time? The sky tombs of Ethiopia challenge one of the most fundamental ideas in archaeology, that every monument has a builder, and every builder leaves behind a name. But the architects of these cliffside crypts remain eerily anonymous. No inscriptions, no royal seals, no grave goods with clear cultural indicators, just the cold, chiseled stone, silent and unyielding. To understand who might have built them, we have to rewind the clock to a time before Ethiopia's recorded kingdoms, before Aksum, before the Christian monasteries carved into rock. In the highlands of Tigray and Amhara, long before written records, there were people, tribes, clans, proto-cultures who lived, farmed, fought and died in isolation. Their tools were stone, their beliefs unwritten, their traditions buried with them. One theory suggests that these tombs were built by a lost highland culture predating the Aksumites by centuries, possibly even millennia. These people may have had no written language, but they understood stone, they knew how to climb, and they were obsessed with the sky. But why go to such lengths to bury the dead hundreds of feet in the air? Some researchers suggest it was about protection against grave robbers, wild animals, or even spiritual defilement. Others believe these tombs served a sacred function, elevating the dead closer to the heavens in a physical ascent of the soul. Still others point to the isolation of the tombs as evidence of social ostracization. Perhaps these were not honored dead, but dangerous ones, exiled priests, sorcerers, or cursed individuals too risky to bury on hallowed ground. Supporting this are the tombs found farthest from villages, lacking any nearby settlement remains, yet carved with great effort. These were not practical burials, they were ritualistic, symbolic, loaded with meaning we no longer understand. And then there's the mystery of the carving technique. The rock is basalt, dense, difficult to cut, yet the tombs show clean chiselling, squared angles, even some symmetry. No iron tools from that period have been found nearby. Did they use bronze, bone, fire-hardening techniques? The labour required would have taken months, if not years, per tomb. So who had the time and authority to demand such work? Oral traditions add another layer of strangeness. In some highland villages, stories tell of the Dagna Wushet, the ones who watch from the cliffs. These shadowy figures are said to have lived apart, spoken rarely, and climbed where no one else could. Some believe they were shamans, others say they were neither alive nor dead, between, like the tombs themselves. Could the Dagna Wushet be echoes of this forgotten civilization? Even ancient inscriptions in distant regions whisper possible connections. South Arabian scripts from early trade networks mention people in the Ethiopian highlands known only as the stone faces. Whether this refers to cliff carvings or the tombs themselves is unclear, but the timing fits and the mystery deepens. The tombs persist like scars in the stone, proof of a people that history has erased. Whoever they were, they lived with the mountains. They shaped death into the cliffs, and they disappeared without a trace until now. If the sky tombs were not merely burials but sacred acts of ascension, then we are not looking at graves. We are looking at forgotten rituals. A civilization's spiritual fingerprint carved into the vertical bones of the earth. And yet, these fingerprints are faded. No priesthoods remain. No liturgies survive. Only the tombs and the questions they raise. Inside some tombs, faint traces of soot line the ceilings. This suggests fire, a common funerary practice, but the discoloration appears in strange patterns, almost ceremonial. In one chamber, concentric soot rings indicate repeated burning in the exact center, over many years. Was this a place where rituals were performed again and again? Was the tomb itself not just a resting place, but a stage for the soul's journey? There are signs, too, of pigments, red ochre, faintly staining the walls in geometric shapes or bands. Red ochre is one of humanity's oldest sacred materials, used from Paleolithic burials to tribal initiations. Its presence here, in skyward tombs, might imply blood, rebirth, or transformation. These were not passive burials. These were sacred ascents. And in a few tombs, archaeologists found carved niches, small alcoves no larger than a human head. In one, a broken skull was found, intentionally placed. Was it ancestor worship? Was the head a vessel of power, or a warning? In many indigenous Ethiopian beliefs, mountains are liminal spaces, thresholds between worlds. The higher the peak, the closer to the spirit realm. Burying the dead in such heights may have symbolized a literal passage into the afterlife, avoiding the contamination of earthly decay. Perhaps these rituals weren't meant to preserve the body, but to free the soul. Local oral histories sometimes describe the tombs as Ziban Meriet, the teeth of the land. In these tales, the cliffs are said to consume the dead, and the spirits rise through the mountain's breath. This poetic language may encode a ritual process we no longer understand. Perhaps the land itself was seen as the last priest, receiving the body, releasing the spirit. But not all rituals were meant to uplift. Some tombs appear to have been sealed not with reverence but with urgency. Heavy stone plugs wedged violently. Scratches on the inner walls, as if someone or something tried to claw its way out. Were these executions disguised as burials? Was this where cursed individuals were entombed alive? Or are we simply misreading the remnants of a collapsing culture? One theory suggests the tombs were part of a death cult, a spiritual elite who believed that only those interred at the highest peaks could reincarnate. Perhaps only a chosen few were allowed these sacred rites, and the effort of climbing was itself part of the ritual, penance for the living, ascension for the dead. Whatever the truth, the rituals are lost, the chants are silent, the meanings have dissolved into stone. But the tombs remain, as altars, as warnings, as echoes. We are looking not just at architecture, but at theology, a belief system carved into cliffs so remote they seem designed to be forgotten. The cliff tombs remain, but the people who carved them have disappeared, not just from the land, but from memory itself. No ruins of villages survive near the sites. No burial grounds aside from the cliffs. No writing, no tools, no descendants claim the tombs as ancestral. It's as though an entire civilization stepped out of time and vanished into stone. Archaeologists have searched the surrounding valleys and highlands for clues. What they find are fragments, pottery shards with no match, stone blades that resemble nothing from known Ethiopian cultures, and burial customs that contradict every nearby tradition. These builders were not from Aksum, nor the Zagwe, nor any traceable ethnic group still living today. So, who were they? One possibility is that they were assimilated, conquered or absorbed into growing kingdoms like Damas or Aksum, their customs erased and their sacred sites abandoned as forbidden relics. But that theory fails to explain the total lack of cultural residue. If they merged into another people, where are the hybrid rituals, the blended languages, the remembered myths? Another, darker theory suggests that this culture suffered a sudden extinction from disease, famine, or even deliberate erasure. If they were seen as heretical or dangerous by rising powers, their memory might have been wiped out in what scholars call cultural damnatio, a purposeful destruction of history. Monks in the highlands later called the tombs demon stairs, and some ancient texts warn against even pointing toward them. Why such fear? Geological records add another dimension. Around 300 BCE, evidence of a powerful regional drought emerges, a mega drought that lasted decades. If the cliff dwellers were an isolated, self-sustaining people, such a shift in climate might have devastated them. Crops failed, springs dried, ritual sites were abandoned, starvation may have scattered survivors into oblivion, or worse, turned their sacred tombs into places of desperate refuge. And then, there's the chilling suggestion that the tombs themselves were not just burial sites, but final acts. Some bodies show no signs of ceremonial positioning, just slumped skeletons, whole families buried together, almost hastily. Were these suicides, mass sacrifices, or were they trapped by enemies or by their own beliefs, choosing death over submission? Oral traditions speak of a time when the cliffs cried blood. Elders whisper that the mountain gods took back their servants and that those who remained dared never climb again. Some modern villagers still avoid the tomb cliffs, not out of superstition but out of ancestral fear. They don't know who built them, only that the price was terrible. And so, the people who carved cathedrals into cliffs vanished. Not only physically, but ideologically. Their gods, their dead, their language, all lost. We are left with shadows in the stone and the unsettling question, how can a culture with such monumental ambition leave no other trace behind? In most ancient civilizations, we find remnants of daily life, tools, toys, trash heaps. But here, we find only death and silence, as if the entire existence of this people revolved around the preparation for the afterlife. Did they live among the living, or only prepare for eternity? Whatever the truth, they are gone, and unlike the pyramids or Petra or Angkor, their creators left no name, no legend, no legacy. Only vertical tombs, and a silence that echoes through the cliffs. What happens when a place becomes too sacred to speak of, or too cursed to remember? The tombs are not just forgotten, they are actively avoided. Oral traditions don't celebrate the builders, they warn of them. Even in modern Ethiopia, these sites are rarely visited. Local shepherds won't climb to them. Children are taught to stay away. The cliffs hold more than bones. They echo with something older and forbidden. At certain sites, explorers have reported a strange phenomenon. Step into one tomb chamber, and even a whisper rebounds in unnatural ways. Clap, and the sound flutters, as if it moves through a tunnel you cannot see. This isn't simple acoustics. It's engineered resonance, walls curved and chambers aligned to create sound that warps perception. Why? Was it for rituals, communication, or a mechanism to frighten those who dared enter? In one of the highest tombs, a researcher performed a sound test, chanting a low hum into the central alcove. The vibration multiplied and swelled, forming harmonic pulses that bounced back and forth. The effect was disorienting, inducing what some call auditory hallucination. Could these chambers have been used to induce altered states? Was this sound used to commune with the dead or to scare off grave robbers with a supernatural force? These are not unfounded superstitions. Across the world, ancient chambers, from Ireland's Newgrange to Peru's Chavin de Huantar, used acoustic design for spiritual effect. The tombs in Ethiopia may have followed the same principle. If so, they weren't just silent monuments. They were instruments, played by the living to reach the other side. But in modern times, those sounds are feared. In villages near the cliffs, elders speak of the tombs that talk. Travellers report hearing strange, wind-like murmurs inside sealed chambers, even with no airflow. Some say it's just echoes, others say it's voices. No one agrees, but everyone avoids them. And when archaeologists tried to map the deepest chambers of one tomb, their equipment failed. Signal loss, compass errors, batteries drained. This isn't Hollywood mythology, it's logged and documented. Is it the geology, iron deposits, or something older left to protect what should not be uncovered? Some believe the tombs were part of a forgotten initiation system, a series of trials or sacred journeys that only a few completed. If so, acoustic manipulation may have played a role in psychological transformation. The living entered the tomb not to bury the dead, but to face death themselves and emerge changed. Or not emerge at all. The echo chambers may have served as gateways between consciousness and transcendence, or between sanity and surrender. More disturbing still is the evidence of structural changes made after the tombs were first carved. Some acoustic tunnels appear blocked by stone clearly added later. Were later generations trying to silence something? Was this knowledge too powerful, too dangerous to pass on? We may never know. The people who built the tombs left no instructions, no warnings, no explanation, just chambers that speak in forgotten frequencies. Just echoing voids that answer your voice with something not quite human. This isn't just silence, it's a design of deliberate unknowing, a forbidden architecture. The echoes may carry answers, but no one dares to ask the right questions anymore. The deeper we go into the mystery of the Ethiopian cliff tombs, the more we realize that we may be looking at something far older than previously imagined. Beneath the chisel marks and weathered stairs, there is a possibility that these structures don't just predate Axum, they predate written history itself. Could these be the remnants of a civilization before time as we know it? Archaeological dating places some tombs at over 2,500 years old, but that's based on surface-level materials, charcoal deposits and bones. The stone architecture itself could be much older. The hardest tombs are carved into basalt, a rock not easily worked with bronze or even early Iron Age tools. Yet the precision of the chambers, the symmetry of the niches and the sharpness of the stairs suggest a technique far beyond what regional civilizations were using at the time. Some researchers speculate that these may be the legacy of a lost proto-civilization, one that flourished during the African humid period when the Sahara and Horn of Africa were verdant and fertile. This so-called Green Sahara era may have supported highland cultures now buried under desert and obscurity. Could the cliff tombs be remnants of one such forgotten people who sought refuge in the mountains as the climate changed? Climatic shifts between 6000 and 3000 BCE were dramatic. Rivers dried, forests vanished, and once thriving cultures were forced to migrate or perish. Some may have turned to the highlands for survival, bringing with them techniques of stone carving and megalithic engineering. Ethiopia is rich in such relics, giant stelae, underground churches, and even sunken palaces. The tombs may be an early prototype of this sacred architecture. If true, this means the tombs were ancient even before the Axumites appeared. The builders could have been part of a widespread prehistoric culture stretching from Nubia to the Horn, possibly connected to the mysterious people who constructed the Nabta Playa Observatory in Egypt's western desert, or the Proto-Saharan populations that migrated southward as the desert expanded. But why are there no tools left behind? No settlements, no inscriptions, no skeletons that clearly belong to these supposed early builders. One theory posits that the cliff tombs were used and reused over millennia, first built by an archaic culture, then adopted by successive waves of people who found them too sacred or too strange to destroy. This layering effect may explain the jumbled carbon dates and inconsistent burial styles. But it still doesn't answer who carved the first step. Curiously, the oldest tombs tend to be the most refined, deeper, smoother, and better aligned with celestial markers. Later ones, by contrast, appear rougher, as if imitation without full understanding. It suggests a reversal of technological progress, where a golden age of builders was followed by decline, not growth. This pattern mirrors other sites across the ancient world. The oldest layers at Göbekli Tepe, Tiahuanaco, and even Malta's own megalithic temples show superior craftsmanship compared to later additions. Are we seeing the same effect here in Ethiopia? If so, the cliff tombs may not just represent a lost culture, but the lost memory of an entire epoch, a time when humans mastered stonework with precision we still don't fully understand, guided by forgotten cosmologies, forgotten sciences, and perhaps a different sense of life and death altogether. The idea that the tombs were carved by people outside the timeline of known history may be controversial, but it is not without precedent. Archaeology, after all, is a puzzle built from scattered fragments, and sometimes the biggest pieces are the ones we can't yet place. If the builders of Ethiopia's cliff tombs have vanished from history, they may have left behind a trace, not in words, but in stone. On closer inspection, these burial chambers are not just empty voids carved into rock. Some are inscribed subtly, deliberately, with cryptic shapes and incisions that defy linguistic classification. They are neither fully symbolic nor purely decorative. They occupy a strange in-between, not writing, yet full of meaning. Near the entrance of one major tomb site, a cluster of small triangular notches are arranged in a spiral pattern. When traced by light, they mimic the motion of the sun as it arcs across the highland sky. Could this be a primitive solar calendar, a marker of seasons? These tombs, after all, seem to align with certain solstices and celestial events. Some researchers believe the tombs weren't just burial places, they were observatories in death. Deeper inside, some walls feature carved channels, thin, vein-like tracks that don't follow natural fault lines. They crisscross chambers with mathematical precision. One theory proposes that they're sound guides, tuning the resonance of chants and ceremonies. Another proposes that they're flow markers, guiding water or incense as part of ancient purification rituals. But no culture in the region is known to have carved such features in their tombs. Where did this knowledge come from? Even more baffling are the handprints. In several tombs, red ochre markings, flattened hands, both small and large, appear on the ceilings, pressed as if reaching towards something beyond. These prints are remarkably well preserved, hinting at an intentional act during or after the tomb's construction. Are they signatures of the dead, blessings from the living, or part of a rite lost to time? There's also the geometry. At least 3 tomb entrances face cardinal directions within a margin of error smaller than 3 degrees. Some align with star paths of Orion and Sirius, constellations considered sacred across ancient Africa and Egypt. This celestial mapping may not be a coincidence. The cliff tombs may have been embedded within a broader cosmology, a sacred landscape where life and death mirrored the heavens. Local stories complicate things further. Elders in nearby villages speak of the marks of the first people, symbols left behind by the star folk, or ones who came before the fire. These are vague legends, not codified mythology, yet they match nothing in known Ethiopian oral traditions. Strangely, similar stories appear thousands of miles away. In Andean myths, Aboriginal Dreamtime, even pre-Sumerian Mesopotamia. Is this mere human pattern-seeking, or a collective memory of a prehistoric knowledge system? Some propose these signs represent a proto-script, an early form of symbolic communication used for ritual, not for trade or history. Unlike linear writing, these markings would have served as mnemonic triggers, activating memory, guiding prayers, or teaching initiates through oral transmission. If true, it's no surprise we can't read them today. They were never meant to be read, only remembered. In the absence of Rosetta Stones, we are left with fragments. No 2 tombs feature the exact same markings. Each seems tailored, personalized, like a spiritual fingerprint. The tombs are not just burial places, but coded repositories, vaults of memory and power, encrypted in stone. Yet most archaeologists avoid these interpretations. They warn against falling into the trap of mysticism, demanding hard evidence. But when faced with ancient construction no culture claims, markings no one can read, and alignments that map the stars, it becomes harder to believe this was just coincidence. Someone was trying to leave a message, but only the stones remain to whisper it. For centuries, researchers have assumed these cliff tombs of Ethiopia were built solely for the dead. But what if death was only part of the story? Across different cultures, especially in the ancient world, burial chambers often served dual purposes. A final resting place, yes, but also a symbolic gateway. A portal not just for the dead, but for the living to undergo death-like experiences. Could these tombs have been used for ritualized symbolic death? A place to simulate burial, so one could be spiritually reborn? This theory, while controversial, has gained momentum. Some tombs show no remains at all. No bones, no grave goods, nothing. Instead, they contain peculiar features. Smooth stone platforms with head-shaped depressions. Small alcoves just wide enough to hold a crouched adult. Some chambers are sealed with stones that seem designed to open from the inside. Why would a tomb need an exit? This matches global patterns of shamanic initiation. In Siberia, Australia, the Amazon, and even ancient Egypt, initiates would undergo symbolic burial, placed in darkness, silence, and isolation for days. When they emerged, they were dead to the world, reborn with new sight, new knowledge. Perhaps the sky tombs served a similar function. The acoustics in these tombs support this. When a voice is spoken aloud within the chamber, it bounces back with eerie precision. Low chants seem to amplify unnaturally. This kind of resonance could alter consciousness, creating auditory hallucinations. Add total darkness, oxygen scarcity, and fasting, and you have a powerful psycho-spiritual environment. A machine for altering the mind. In fact, one chamber is known locally as the womb of stars. According to villagers, elders would enter and not speak for day. When they came out, they were changed. They became story keepers, diviners, and leaders. There are whispers that some never returned, not because they died, but because they chose to stay in that other state between life and death. If true, then the tombs weren't graves. They were cocoons. Some scholars point to the duality in local iconography. There are motifs carved into nearby stones that resemble butterflies, snakes, even birds rising upward. These are classic metaphors for transformation, symbols of metamorphosis. Death is not an ending here, it's a passage. There's also something unsettling. Several tombs contain figures carved into the walls, strange humanoid shapes, stretched or contorted, hands raised to the ceiling. They seem less like tributes and more like warnings. Are these echoes of those who failed the journey? Then there's the silence in the records. Nowhere in Ethiopia's ancient texts, Christian, Islamic, or animist, do we find mention of these cliff tombs, not even folklore. Why? Perhaps they were deliberately forgotten, hidden, because they represented a kind of knowledge too dangerous or too sacred for the common world. Or perhaps these weren't tombs in the way we understand them. They weren't built for death, but for becoming, a station between the human and the divine. A final test. If so, then the question changes. We no longer ask, who died here, but who was born here? In the absence of answers, we're left with a riddle in stone, a chamber in a cliff, a sound in the dark, a mark on the wall, and a human mind on the edge of transformation. As we approach the end of our descent through the sky tombs, one question lingers louder than the rest. Who built them? Despite centuries of study, no one can say for certain. No written record, no known name, no living people who claim the tombs as their own heritage. The architects of these cliff cities seem to have vanished, leaving behind only stone, silence, and speculation. There are no visible signs of tool marks consistent with medieval Ethiopian masonry. Some walls are laser straight, the interiors carved with a precision that belies the region's ancient tools. And yet, there is no evidence of scaffolding, no staging ground, no roads leading to the tomb faces. It's as if the builders floated up to the cliffs, or were already there. The dating doesn't help either. Radiocarbon analysis of organic materials near the tombs yields inconsistent results. Some point to 500 BCE, others to 700 CE, still others to as late as 1200. This range is too broad, too murky. It suggests that either the tombs were reused over time by different cultures, or that they were always outside the timeline, untethered to any known period. Some researchers propose that the builders may have come from the north, early Afro-Arabian seafarers who vanished inland. Others point east to ancient Kushite migrations, and a few whisper of an even older, undocumented people, the pre-Aksumite ghosts, a civilization that left no name, no artifacts, only impossible architecture. Could this have been a lost group erased by later conquests or climate disaster? There's a haunting theory that perhaps these architects never meant to be remembered, that the entire purpose of their design was invisibility, a sacred anonymity, to build their legacy into the cliffs and then disappear behind the veil of myth. If so, they succeeded spectacularly. Curiously, similar architectural styles exist in Yemen and Oman, ancient tombs carved high into cliff faces, with narrow entrances and acoustic interiors. Could the Ethiopian sky tombs be a southern echo of a broader forgotten cultural network? A silent brotherhood that spanned continents and centuries, communicating not in texts or temples but in stone? Satellite imagery has revealed more than 60 such sites in Ethiopia's remote highlands, many completely inaccessible, untouched, unstudied. They wait in the shadows, like messages never read. What might they tell us if we could reach them? Even in local oral traditions, there is a blank space. The elders of surrounding villages often say the same thing. These places were here before our grandfathers were born. A simple sentence, a quiet admission that the tombs were always ancient, always unknown. But perhaps that is the answer. The tombs are not a message meant to be deciphered. They are a question, a mirror, a reflection of our hunger to understand the past and the limits of our reach. As we leave this stone world in the cliffs, we realize that the mystery is not just about lost civilizations, it's about us, our curiosity, our fear of forgetting, and our awe in the face of what can never fully be explained. The architects are gone, their names are lost, but their work endures, not in museums or manuscripts, but in silence, shadow, and stone. When the tools of science fall silent, stories begin to speak. Among the peoples of Ethiopia's highlands, especially those living near the tombs, there are tales, strange ones, stories that refuse to be dismissed as simple folklore. Because while archaeology measures stone, culture preserves memory. The elders tell of beings who were neither human nor animal, tall figures with gleaming eyes and voices that echoed like wind in caves. Some call them the cliff walkers, others the quiet builders. They arrived from nowhere, constructed cities in impossible places, and vanished when their work was done. The tombs, according to these stories, are not tombs at all, but doorways, not to the afterlife, but to somewhere else entirely. Across Ethiopia, there are variations of these legends, but they share a striking similarity, the belief that the structures were not made by ordinary men. In the Saho and Afar regions, the term Waga refers to ancestral spirits who dwell in high places. In southern highland myths, beings called Zinj are said to have come from the mountains, built stone houses without tools, then disappeared into the wind. The legends deepen when we compare them to those across the Red Sea. In Yemen and Oman, rock-cut tombs perched high on cliffs are said to have been carved by jinn, supernatural entities with immense strength and ancient knowledge. Could these myths have sailed across with early Afro-Arabian travelers? Or are they rooted in something older, some memory etched into the human subconscious of a time when giants or gods carved the land? Some ancient Ethiopian texts, such as the Kebra Nagast, hint at pre-Aksumite wisdom hidden in the mountains. The knowledge of the heights, one passage calls it. Though veiled in religious metaphor, the suggestion remains. sacred knowledge embedded in the stone places of the world. Symbols have been found near some tombs, faint spirals, geometric marks, even patterns resembling Proto-South Arabian inscriptions. They resist translation. Are they writing, territory markers, astronomical indicators, or ritual signs for spirits rather than scholars? One recurring image across various sites is that of a doorway within a circle, a passage to somewhere enclosed. Some see this as a cosmic symbol, a portal to the stars. Others believe it's an invitation, a warning, or both. Carvings fade, but meaning endures. Even the local children play a game called Whisper to the Cliff, where one shouts into a tomb and listens for an answer. Sometimes they say the rock answers back. Whether it's echo or something stranger depends on who you ask. It's tempting to dismiss all of this as fantasy. But myth has its place. Often, it is where truth survives when records do not. And in places where the ground won't yield coins, bones, or names, perhaps stories are the only clues we have left. So we return to the cliffs, not just as archaeologists or explorers, but as listeners, hoping that somewhere in the murmured stories of spirit builders and skywalkers, we might hear the faint truth behind the stones. The journey through Ethiopia's sky tombs leads us not to answers, but to echoes. What remains is not a narrative etched in stone, but a question suspended in time. The tombs are still here, immune to wind and war, waiting for someone, anyone, to understand what they mean. Yet the builders are long gone, their language forgotten, their traditions unrecorded. Their very existence is erased from every textbook, scroll, and archive. And maybe that's the most haunting part. We want history to speak clearly, to tell us who, when, and why. But the sky tombs refuse. They challenge our linear thinking. They defy the idea that great civilizations must leave behind kings, armies, and cities. Instead, they offer something quieter, more elemental, a testament built into the cliffs, resistant not only to time but to translation. Anthropologists, archaeologists, linguists, all have tried to explain the tombs. Some say they were burial chambers. Others insist they were ritual spaces, initiation zones, even celestial observatories. Every theory feels partial, like trying to assemble a story with only half the letters. Without oral tradition, without inscriptions, we are reading shadows on stone. But here's what we do know. Someone climbed these cliffs with tools, vision, and purpose. Someone took the time to carve square rooms, align entrances to the sun, and shape spaces that sing when you speak into them. Someone believed that death, or perhaps transcendence, belonged not beneath the ground, but above it, in the sky. And someone vanished so thoroughly that we can only guess at their name. This makes the tombs more than architecture. They are psychological landscapes. Every empty chamber becomes a mirror for our imagination. Every unanswered question becomes an invitation to wonder, to reframe, to reimagine what civilizations can look like. Somewhere, beneath the layers of erosion and mystery, lies a truth we may never fully access. But perhaps the point is not to solve the mystery, but to be moved by it, to allow it to shift how we think about history, memory, and meaning, to accept that not every great society needs a written record to be great. Some just need stone, silence, and sky. In the absence of names and dates, we are left with a presence, a feeling that these places mattered immensely to someone once, that they were sacred, that their builders, whoever they were, achieved something few cultures ever do. They built for mystery, not to be understood, but to be remembered, wordlessly. As we rise above the final cliff, the tombs fade into the fog again. Another cycle closes, another mystery slips back into the rock. But something has changed in us. We've seen what lies above the world, carved by hands we'll never meet, in silence we'll never break. And that, in itself, is a kind of message. Not all tombs are endings, some are beginnings, waiting to be seen, not solved but honored. In a world obsessed with visibility, where every empire must leave behind scrolls, statues, or steel, we are confronted here by the opposite. The cliff tombs of Ethiopia offer no name, no legend, no author. They are not declarations of power, they are whispers, and perhaps that is why they haunt us. We came looking for answers, names, dates, motives, but what we found was something far more profound: silence as testimony. These sky tombs do not cry out for discovery. They do not demand explanation. Instead, they exist in quiet defiance of the historical record, as if to remind us that not all legacies are meant to be understood. Some are meant to be felt, and yet we are human. We need meaning. We project stories into every chiseled corner and decode every angle for purpose. But with each descent into these tombs, we find ourselves meeting the limits of our knowledge, and perhaps the limits of our entitlement to know. These were never tombs built for our eyes. They were built for eternity, for ancestors, for gods, or for reasons we can't begin to comprehend. The cliffs of northern Ethiopia are not just a geographic feature. They are a boundary between the known and the unknowable. On one side, the cities we can excavate, the cultures we can classify. On the other, this, a civilization that left no evidence except architecture, carved into vertical stone, suspended above time like a forgotten prayer. What kind of people does that? What worldview allows for that kind of ambition in death? Perhaps it was never about death. Perhaps these tombs were vessels for transcendence, a sacred belief that to die is to rise quite literally into the sky, the journey upward, chiseled into stone. We may never know who carved these spaces, but their fingerprints remain, not in the traditional sense, not in DNA or pottery shards, but in the way the stone bends to their will, in the acoustic resonance of the chambers, in the impossible geometry of their designs. These are not marks of decay, they are signatures of purpose. There is something deeply humbling about realizing that a culture this advanced, this intentional, could vanish without so much as a footnote in global history. No battles, no treaties, no ruins of conquest, just tombs and cliffs. It makes us wonder, how many other civilizations have vanished without our noticing? How many stories remain locked in geology, waiting to be mistaken for nature? Maybe the tombs are more than burial sites. Maybe they are questions carved into stone, and maybe we, the living, are their intended readers, not to answer those questions, but to feel the awe in confronting them. The mystery is not just in the cliffs, it's in us, our inability to let go of the need for closure, our hunger for lineage, our fear of the forgotten. But history is not always linear. It is sometimes carved in reverse, hidden in the high places, where only silence and shadow remain. So as we leave these ancient heights, we do not take away conclusions, we take away wonder. We carry the burden and the blessing of curiosity. We understand now more than ever that not all legacies are made of gold or empire. Some are carved in stone, left for no one and discovered by everyone. The sky tombs do not ask to be solved, they ask to be respected. And perhaps that's the lesson, that some mysteries are sacred not because they are unknowable, but because they were never meant to be known, only witnessed. So look up next time you pass a cliff face. The builders may be long gone, but their stories are still there, held in the stone, waiting for eyes like yours to see them. We have journeyed through vertical catacombs and sunlit cliffs, through myths and measurements, silence and speculation, and yet, like the tombs themselves, our exploration ends in uncertainty. The builders of Ethiopia's sky tombs left behind no texts, no names, no graves that can speak, just stone, cold, imposing, silent. We've studied the impossible locations. We've listened to the acoustics, examined the patterns, and traced whispers of connections that stretch across continents. But for all our searching, we are no closer to knowing who carved these chambers, or why they abandoned them. Perhaps the answer lies not in what we find, but in what we don't. Maybe these tombs were never meant to be discovered. Maybe they are monuments not to the dead, but to the unknown, to the idea that some truths are not meant to be remembered, but revered in their absence. The sky tombs of Ethiopia are more than architectural mysteries. They are warnings against historical arrogance, proof that entire belief systems, spiritual worlds and social orders can vanish and leave behind only shapes in stone. We live in a time where information is instant, where memory is digital. But the people who built these tombs placed their legacy in cliffs, knowing they might be forgotten, and in doing so, they became immortal, not in name, but in enigma. Each tomb remains sealed in more than rock. It's sealed in our minds, until we choose to climb, to question, to listen, not just to what history says, but to what it refuses to say. Because in the end, it's not only about what was lost, it's about what we're still willing to find. So the next time you hear the wind against stone, the next time silence feels heavier than sound, remember, someone, long ago, carved their questions into the cliffs, maybe for us, maybe for no one, maybe just so the mystery would live forever.